Okay. So if well earlier I kind of lost my chat, didn't I? Is it still in there? Yeah. So let me pop this back in the chat. If anyone hasn't been to the study guide, that's what this is. Oh, so there we go. And if you need to go back and catch up to us, then everything is in this lab guide and it kind of builds on itself. But sometimes we use different lab environments, and that's what this one is. I want to show you how to use this lab environment from Red Hat so that you can practice on the controller. Just trying to get back to where we were. Like all my stuff got messed up when I lost my browser. Oh my goodness. There's a lot of stuff in here now. Here's the navigator from last time. All right, so here is today, May 11th, Ansible Automation Controller. So the controller is really the main component of the Ansible automation platform that typically we use, right? So that's where we manage the automation. That's where we manage running playbooks as job templates. That's where we set up projects so that we know where the files are. We can either have local files or we can pull in files from repositories, which is the suggested way. So most of what we do in the Ansible controller, again, is similar to what we can do in Ansible Navigator. But we need to understand how to navigate through the GUI, because in the test, if you were to take the newer test, right? So they're in a process of updating the Ansible specialist for network automation. And if you ever took the older one, I took the this current version that's being updated. It had Tower. So there are some differences, like just where things are located, and some of the features are different too, right? So if you take Tower and you compare it to the controller, you will have a little bit of a learning curve trying to figure out where everything is. So it's a good idea to become familiar with the controller, because you will see the controller. And then also, the controller has a lot of features and functionality of things you can do in the controller that you can't do or necessarily do easily from running Ansible Core Engine or even Ansible Navigator. Even though they both use the container, the Navigator doesn't have a notion of workflows and surveys and other additional features that are really useful for automation. So those are the things that you want to learn how to do in a controller, are the things like the value-added things that help you move your automation into production and be able to manage it at scale. So it gives you all the tools that you need to manage your automation and other guardrails like workflows with approvals, notifications, additional logging, and being able to set roles-based access. And you may have noticed that like I forgot to set like all my levels properly when I was logged in as backup, so I wasn't able to see all the credentials. Or maybe that was on purpose, right? Maybe I shouldn't see all the credentials. So that was the difference between an admin and then just the user that I had backups had a team, and in that team it had access to particular roles. So we're not really getting into roles and stuff today, but I just wanted to throw that out there. So what we've done so far is we've learned how to do like the basics of using Ansible Core Engine and setting up like everything that you need as prerequisites to run a playbook. And we have ran some playbooks, and then we've also ran some ad hoc commands. So you've learned how to set up your inventories, how to use Vault, how to set variables in the inventory and group vars and host vars, and then also precedents. So things like extra variables would override existing variables. So all of those things that we've done using the CML sandbox and Cisco, so that we had routers and switches, but we were using Ansible playbook from the Ansible Core Engine from their jump box, right? So you still need to know how to use Ansible Core Engine, right? So from an open source side of things. The second thing we did is we did really all the same things. And in most cases, we used the exact same files, because we took our files, and every time that we go through a lab, and if you haven't been through the labs, you're going to want to do this as well, is you want to save your work into your My Projects repo. So that way, when you go back, you still have an inventory file. You have all these variables that you've set in previous labs, and you can take them and build on them as we move forward. So that way you don't have to keep recreating them every time. But it is recommended too. I would suggest that you go back from time to time just to refresh and build some of these things from scratch. So like working in your inventory, working in different, syntax with INI versus YAML, those types of things. Just make sure that you keep working on those because over time, it's hard to retain some of that stuff. But you don't want to build them every time so you can get to the meat of whatever you're studying. But you also want to keep that um, going for sustainability. So in the controller, here's some links. We're not going to go through here's everything about the controller. Today, we're just going to really learn how to use it in that same context to spin up what we need to prerequisites, and then leverage a job template so we can run a playbook. So in this lab setup, so if you don't have a controller, right, then you can use this lab here. So this is a link to an instruct lab that you can go and use whenever you'd like. So I'll go ahead and pop this into the messages. So this is sort of like a sandbox that you're familiar with Cisco, but this is a Red Hat lab environment. And you can, feel free to use this whenever you'd like. So when we have our particular environment, so just go ahead and click on it. And you'll see it says DevOps and CI/CD. This is a lab that's prepackaged, but we can still use the AAP that's inside this instruct. So what you'll notice is when you launch it, it has, some documentation and some things that are regarding the specific lab. All that's over here. You can hide that, right? So if you want to get rid of it, just click over here, and then it brings up the entire screen. You'll notice that you have a VS Code, right? And you can create a terminal. And that gives you access to the server. And then what's important for you is this. This is the Ansible Automation Platform Controller. In the lab, it shows you credentials and all that. So what it is admin, and it's Ansible 1, 2, 3, bang. And I think I included that in the lab guide, I'm pretty sure. Right, so this gives you a controller, and it has some stuff already in it. Just disregard these, right, and focus on templates and things that we're building, right? But the cool thing about this is you have this, and it lasts for like almost 2 hours. So it gives you enough time to get in, become familiar, run some labs, and then when it goes away, it's gone. So that's why if you do anything in VS Code, you're going to want to save those files to your My Project, right? So you can have access to updating your repo from in here. And that's kind of like what we're talking about in the next couple of steps. So if I take this tab and pull it out so I can move it over, and then we've got this over here, the lab guide, and I get this out of the way. All right, so I'm actually in the one where I edit it, but that's okay. Yours should look a little bit different. You should be in the one where it's the actual lab guide. Yeah, here's the credentials. So here's talking about the VS Code, bring up a new terminal like I did. And then here is cloning your project down. So in this particular step, actually, this is going to look kind of funky. So let me go to preview, and hopefully it doesn't take me to the top of this thing. It did. Dang it. So I got to go all the way down. Get back up. Yeah, so here's about where I was. Yeah, so what you're going to want to do is your particular one. So if you haven't done this yet, you're going to go and create an account in GitLab. It's free. And then just remember your username. So let me get this out of the way. I need to fix it, or it's not going to do anything. Tdubial 1. Whenever you see Tdubial 1, don't use that. It's just an example, right? So it's always alluding to like your username right here. Right, so clone down my stuff, and then I could just change directories into it. And then I've got all my labs from before. I mean, all my files from previous labs. All right, so configure your Git settings to work from the terminal. This is so I can save later. So what this is alluding to is your username again. This is for when we commit. So paste that in there. T-Dubio. Right, so at the end, when I save this, that'll be important because otherwise it won't know who I am. It won't know who I am on this terminal. Okay, so here we're going to create a playbook. I'm just going to copy and paste. Pretty interesting time. And you don't have to use Vim, right? You can actually use your folders as well. So one thing that I didn't do here, let me stop for a second. I go back to here. I can open up a new window here. Right now, it removed my terminal, so I have to bring that back. But what I can do here is open a folder. And now that I've brought in my files, or where was I? Oh, that's weird. Where were we at? Hold on. Go back to here. Oh, I did mine inside this. I shouldn't have did that. Yeah, so let me do that again. I need to file, new window, or actually I could have just used the one. All right, so let me do the terminal. Home student, that'll work. Can I up arrow key? No. So git clone. You need all the rest of that stuff. So this. No, not that one. No, that is me. This is it. Copy. Allow. I got to fix my username. OS. All right, so I had the My Project here. So I should be able to go up here and open and find it. Hit OK. Now my files are here too. So I can just click on files and I can edit it and it'll bring up a tab. So if I just click on anything, it brings it up over here. Right, and actually I made that playbook already because I was messing around with it earlier. So I'll need to fix this and make it look like this. File save. All right, so I don't have a terminal. So just whenever you do that, you have to go back and bring up a new terminal. And then that terminal will be in your My Project. All right, so now everything's where it should be. So it was telling me to create this playbook, and here it is right here. It's just that I actually went through this lab, and I forgot to delete it back out. So I already have this in here. So that's that. Now, once you create a file, and I changed mine, I need to save it. So I can either save it from file, or you can do Control S, and that saves it. But it's not really in my repo. So earlier, it was saying to do this. So let me do that again. Add my username locally. T-Dubiel1. Oh, Git. All right, so now that's in there. And then these are Git commands. So this is what I was talking about earlier. And I guess it's good to become familiar with these. So Git add. I could just do that one file, or if you just want to use all, it'll grab everything that's not a part of the Git ignore. You need 2 dashes. And then once you add it, it's staged, but you need to commit it. -M, and just anything really. So just playbook. This is really for your purposes, the comment. Right. So this one is complaining that I didn't do anything with the email. But you can ignore this. So it's complaining because I didn't do the email, but username is good enough. So I can ignore that. Right. So the next thing is push it. It does have the username. See how it pops up here? So if it didn't have the username, it wouldn't go any further. And by username, like locally in Git, but through the integration with VS Code, then that repo requires me to log in. So I'll put my username again here. I'll get to this point. Then I have to log in with my password. And then now it's updated my repo. So I have that playbook saved, which was already saved. But if you're creating it, then that's what you would do. You don't really have to do that every time you save a file. But at a minimum, you would want to do that at the end of your lab, right? And do it all, and then everything you've changed. Make sure that you update it in your repo, otherwise you lose that work. So in the controller, we'll go through the steps that we need because we have a playbook now. So we can go to our repo and we can use the controller that's in this lab. So the controller is back here on that first tab. And click on controller. And I'm still logged in. So the first thing is a project. So here's a project for that existing lab. We want to add a project. And we're calling it SNMP. And then for the execution environment default, I think I just leave that alone and it should pick it on its own. Organization, just leave that alone, the Acme one. Source control, that's important. Right, so here, this is my project. Right, so you would want to use your own. So I need to actually include my stuff. So https lab t do beal 1 I project. Right, so the .git at the end is important too. All right, so the other stuff that's in here can just be the defaults. So I'll save that. Right, so now that that's in there, it's syncing. So hopefully it works. Yeah, so it did. It synced up with it. So now the automation controller is synced up with my project. So it has access to that playbook that I saved and I updated, right? So that's in there. So the next thing that we need is once we have the project, we need to make sure that we have an inventory. So we can grab our host that we're using for this lab from our host.yamls file and create an inventory from that. So we can create an inventory from the GUI, but we can also pull an inventory in from a repository. So that's what we're going to do here. So the first thing is an inventory. So first step, inventory, add one, add inventory, my inventory. And then things that we need to change are really nothing. We'll just keep the same organization and all that stuff. So this is just an empty inventory. Where it gets the information from is the source. So click source, add, and give it a name, my source. And then what's important here to keep the organization, the execution environment, just leave that alone for now. Inventory file in the source itself, right? So source would be from a project. And then once the project piece opens up, then you give it the name of the project, which was my project, right? Or no, SNMP was the name of the project. SNMP was the project. Inventory file, you just type in what it is. So our inventory is inventory.yaml. Enter. Right, so you got that in there. So that's what's going to look for, that file. And then you have these other options to set as well. I usually set this one so that way if we change the inventory, then it'll go through and change it here. From the project changes, then the inventory would want to change along with the project if the inventory file, host file changes in the project. So we save that, then we sync it. And if it works, I should be able to go in my inventories, my inventory, and then it's got all the groups that we created from our inventory in the previous labs. And it also has all the hosts. And if you click on anything, it'll have any information, if there is any variable set under there. Those are all defined and pulled in, based off of that inventory.yaml file. So that saves a lot of time. Doing it from the GUI, creating an inventory isn't the best thing in the world. All right, so the next thing that we have in inventory is we can create a job template. And the job template maps to your playbook that you want to run. So we're going to call it SNMP. SNMP. And we're going to select SNMP is the project. Inventory is my inventory. Right, and then playbook is playbook YAML. That's the one with the SNMP lines that we saw earlier. And what else do I need? I think that's it. We don't have to set credentials because the username and password were already set in the, I think it was in the group bar, because it's that always on Cisco environment. So the passwords are public anyway. But normally you would set credentials, right? Just like we did earlier. So I'll go ahead and I'll save this. All right, so now that it's saved, I can launch it. But you can see it's going to have a pop-up. But I think I forgot to do that part. Yeah, see this little check mark here? So here, prompt on launch. No, not that one. Am I not seeing the whole screen? This one right here, job type, prompt on launch. So the default is run. And what that means is if I run a playbook and it has a configuration, depending on the state, which is normally by default merge, it'll go ahead and make that change. But if I run it in check mode, it'll run the playbook, but it doesn't actually apply the configuration to the targeted device. So these are good for like compliance checks and the like. So this gives us an option, because normally it's just going to run it, right? That's the default. But before it runs this playbook, it'll give us an option to change from run to check mode. So I just put that in there just to show an example of that. And we want to see that too, because we're going to make a change, and then we're going to see it in check mode and do some things so that you can kind of see what it would look like as a compliance check. So I'm going to save it. Job template with this organization name combination already exists. So did I made two of the same thing? How did I wind up with two of them? All right, so does this have everything that I want? Yeah, this one's different. So let me go back. And delete one of these. Delete should be up here. Yeah, delete it. Delete. All right, and then make sure this one has the config. Run. Oh, that one doesn't have it either. All right, so that, let me save it, launch it. All right, so here's the drop down. You can run it or check. So we'll do run. Next, launch. Now, because that router is the same router, if one of you guys ran it, then it's not going to show change because it's already been configured. So we'll find out here in a second. All right, so this one did change. Okay, so we made that configuration change to the router. Those community strings should be in there. The router is this, right? So we can actually click on this. Oh, dang it. Jobs. Dashboard. Usually when that happens, I'll go back to dashboard, jobs. I think this is my Chrome doing that. Click back in here. I just want to grab this host name right here. Control C. And then I'll just log into it from this. SSH. It's admin is the user. Cisco 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Show run SNMP. All right, so here's the two community strings that we sent to the router. Now, where the check mode is important is if I go back into here, and I'll add another line there. So there was a line that it's talking about a little bit further down. This one right here. So I save it. But for the AAP to have access to it, I have to go through those other iterations. So git add -- all, git commit -m, whatever. Ignore that. Git push. Oh, yeah, I got to fill this up. Oops, sometimes I forget that the pop-up comes at the top. So that's gone. Right, so now it's updated. So this time we've made a change, right? We added a third line of config. So that would allude to the SNMP, community string for this Ansible-test to be added. But if I just want to see what it would do, then what I can do is I can run that same job templates down here, SNMP, run it in check mode. Now, when we see the yellow lines in changed, then that means that it's a new configuration, right? Because it still looks at the targeted device and it can say, oh yeah, that community string is not there. So the outcome would be changed from running this configuration line. But in check mode, it'll check and it'll tell us that it would be changed, but it's not actually going to change it. So I'll go ahead and run this and we'll validate that. Because it's idempotent. Now it's green here. So let's see what happened in our jobs. So maybe I didn't do the update the project thing properly. So in jobs, playbook, it did inventory sync, but it didn't look like it did the project. So let's go to the project. And let's sync this. So right here it says A7. Let's keep an eye on that. Yeah, it didn't. We didn't have the latest change. So if you don't remember to do the project as the auto update, then that could happen, right? So our inventory was based off of the older project information. So we updated our project. So now I go back to templates and I'll run it in check mode. And it should see that third line now. Just keep an eye on your project. If you keep changing things and it keeps doing the same thing in your AAP, 9 times out of 10, it's your project hasn't been updated. All right, so here it says changed, right? But when I go back to here and run it again, then you can see that we only have the 2 lines. So just a real quick check here is details, and then grab my job template and then launch it again. Now this time leave it in run mode. And it should see that that config doesn't exist and that it's in run mode, so it's going to push that third line. All right, so now we have 3 lines. So I believe that might be, yeah, so we validated and all that. Yeah, cool. Yeah, so all we have to remember now is we saved like our last change. So our My Project is up to date. But normally at the end of the lab, I would just remind you like, hey, make sure you change your, or go in and commit your changed work in your My Project and then push that back into your repo. But I'm up to date, so we're actually, we completed the lab and everything is saved. So the next time around, we're going to switch gears and we're going to go into more advanced topics. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to hit advanced topics using Ansible Playbook and running locally. And then we'll hit advanced topics from the navigator, and then we'll hit advanced topics from the controller. And we'll just kind of cycle through like that. But when we are in areas of advanced topics for most of the network automation scenarios that require a topology and require things like OSPF routing and BGP and those types of things, then we will use the CML, the Cisco Modeling Labs sandbox, so that we can bring up a topology, which does limit us because then we have to do those using the Ansible-playbook. But for things that I can get away with using these always-on routers at DevNet, then we'll use those as much as we can. But a lot of this stuff that has multiple routers and the topology, then we will have to do that from the Ansible playbook. But just, as you see these patterns, you'll see like how you built it there. What do you need to change, in order for it to work in the navigator or for it to work in the AAP? So just nuances between, credentials and those types of things. And then when you're working in an EE, just those, particular one-offs there versus when you're running it locally with the Ansible-playbook, from the Ansible core engine installed locally on, in this case, the jump box in the sandbox. So that is this particular lab. So thanks for staying on and for joining on a Thursday instead of a Friday. But before I jump off, does anybody have any questions on those particular labs? Or any comments or really anything before I stop the recording? Okay. Well, I hope everybody has a good rest of your afternoon. And I will be updating like the next event. And I'm trying to decide on exactly what topic, but most likely it may be BGP and the new validated content for BGP. And for that one, I probably will use the CML topology to go through those. So it may be that. Just check me out on the meetup page. You'll see the new event will be posted here either later today or tomorrow, and it'll be in 2 weeks. And I'll also have something to update it on LinkedIn as well. So again, thanks again, and I'll see you in about 2 weeks. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Take care. Bye-bye.
You too. All right, so stop here.